Hello and very welcome. The Privacy Week 2020 is slightly different than it used to be. You might have noticed. We have distributed floors, and as it is, as every year, we tried different things every year so far. So this year we are trying lightning talks. We'll get to that shortly, but first let me give you some information. First of all, so this will happen in two parts. First of all, in the stream here, we first have a hello from our three speakers and their lightning talks. And after that, you will have the opportunity to have contact them in a workshop room. So you can change to the room. The link is in the Fahrplan, in the schedule. It's the German term for schedule, FAHRPLAN. And there they will be waiting for you and your questions. So you don't have to put your questions, you don't have to send us questions via Twitter or Mastodon or the forum. Of course, you can do that, and we will hand them over to the workshop room to be answered here. Otherwise, I would say very welcome. You're very welcome. Hello, Sabine Simo. We have Friedemann Ebert. Hello. And we have Fabian. And there are three very different talks. I'm very curious, but maybe you want to say hello. Yeah, I'll start. So I was mentioned first, so I'll start. I'm working with Polypoly for 6 months now. We are a data union, more or less, and we want to build a new data infrastructure that enables us to both collect data without privacy infringement. And yeah, sorry, I'm a bit American with my language. You, of course, have the English translation, so you won't notice. And yeah, so you can get rights to these data and also have a remuneration. So you really are sovereign with your data. Yeah, very interesting project. Friedemann, want to say hello? Yeah, I'd like to. I will talk about the duty to record 2 fingerprints on new IDs starting
Which will
August.
be introduced in 2021 in August, and I had a presentation in Germany at the Parliament, but the underlying basis is a European regulation that affects all European countries, so that includes Austria, France, and so on. And it is, in fact, an EU-wide issue, and there's interesting news from the German Parliament too. Yeah, that's interesting. So the audience can prepare and look forward to more information. Fabian, you have a very different project. Yes, hello. I bought a notebook and I wrote down how to get completely free software into that which includes not just the operating system, but also the BIOS, for those that understand it. But there is more software in a computer than the one you normally install, and we have the perhaps unprecedented situation that a device that is as free as possible can be bought in stores. How I did this and how it can be done, I will explain with a video. And for those in Vienna that want to copy my project, I'm around. You can actually contact me and get some help. Fantastic. Okay, Our speakers will be moving to the break room now, and we'll be waiting for your questions. If you're in the audience, we'll just say, all of us, let's the movies start.
So the problem is, there's a saying, if you're not paying for it, oh, this is in English, so I'll be switching to German now. Hallo, ich kümmere mich um die Schnittstelle zwischen Sensoren, dem Körper und Daten. Und es gibt Firmen, die verteilte Technologien verwenden, um Bürger zu ermächtigen, um den finanziellen Wert ihrer Daten selber auszunutzen. Und wir glauben an ein neues ökonomisches Modell für Daten, weil das meiste Kapital, das mit Daten erzeugt wird, von großen Firmen übernommen wird. So, zum Beispiel, wenn man eine PayPal-Zahlung vornimmt, dann entstehen mehrere hundert Datenpunkte, die an sehr viele Gruppen in 66 verschiedenen Läden gehen. Und so ein Account, in dem $320 drin sind, ist, ein PayPal-Account ist einfach $320 wert, ein Facebook-Account 75. So, also warum wollen wir das jetzt in Europa machen? Also wir haben einfach die DSGVO seit 2018 und wir haben 100 Millionen mögliche Mitglieder in Europa. So, wir akzeptieren Cookies und wir wissen, dass Messenger nicht sicher sind, aber es gibt jetzt einfach gerade Alternativen. Und wir bei Polypoly wollen diese Alternative bauen. Polypoly baut die technische Infrastruktur, damit die Daten das Telefon niemals verlassen oder das Smartphone. Und die Mitglieder sollen volle Datensouveränität haben, um zu entscheiden, ob und an wen sie Daten verteilen, im Gegenzug zu einem finanziellen Ausgleich. Und wir haben das Polyverse erzeugt. Was ist das? Das Polyverse besteht aus 3 Einheiten. Es ist ein Ökosystem für Daten, das dezentralisiert funktioniert. Es ist kooperativ und die Mitglieder oder Teilnehmer arbeiten zusammen, um das zu erzeugen. Wir arbeiten an einem Framework, also einem Rahmen, wie man mit Daten umgehen kann. Die Firmen können mit den Daten arbeiten, ohne die Rechte ihrer Mitglieder in irgendeiner Weise zu beschneiden. Wenn man Geld als Mitglied erhält, dann bekommt der Rahmen einen kleinen Prozentsatz. Also es gibt ein Membership-Feature, das man an andere Clubs, NGOs oder also Nichtregierungsorganisationen oder andere Mitglieder verkaufen kann. Und ein wichtiger Teil ist der Polypop. Das ist eine eigenständige Applikation, die läuft auf Android und iOS. Und dafür haben wir die IDE erschaffen, eine Entwicklungsumgebung, die es Startups und Designern erlaubt, auf dem Polybot aufzubauen, um Features oder um diese kleinen Applikationen aufzubauen. So, dann als nächstes haben wir einen Teil, ein Super, der Daten von Variables und kleinen Geräten aufnimmt. Es gibt kaum Daten, die den Einfluss von unserer Umgebung auf unsere Gesundheit mehr anzeigt als Wearable-Daten. Aber es gibt keine echte Applikation, die es erlaubt, ein Medikament in der Öffentlichkeit zu untersuchen oder auch eine Impfung darauf zu untersuchen, wie es unsere Gesundheit beeinflusst. Und wir glauben daran, dass wir ein ökonomisches Modell für Daten brauchen und bauen können, das besser für alle Teilnehmer funktioniert. Vielen Dank für eure Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you for the opportunity to give the statement. The head of the Commission, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Friedrich Ebelt, and I'm representing the position of the privacy and basic rights organization Digital Courage from Bielefeld, and our written statement that you can see on the Parliament website and on our website, digitalcourage.de. We will argue why we believe that the planned fingerprinting obligation has to be checked by law, by a court as soon as possible. In July 2020, we started a campaign using the hashtag Perso ohne Finger to inform people about the plans for an obligation for fingerprints in ID cards. And Digital Courage recommends that all citizens that prefer to have an ID card without fingerprints to get a new one before the 2nd of August of 2021. Why? We believe that a blanket and the fingerprinting obligation without cause is not sensible and not necessary, and that it violates basic rights. As the most effective and cheapest way of a comprehensive check of the compatibility to basic laws, we suggest that you reject this draft law and that you start an infringement case at the European Court of Justice to verify to what extent the regulation is proportionate in the light of the EU Charter on Human Rights. And we believe that the regulation is not proportionate, and that the draft law here at the debate here in the German Parliament isn't either. And I'll just summarize our reasoning. It's all in the written statement. The planned obligation for fingerprinting in ID cards, in our view, equates to a general suspicion against all citizens, because what is to be registered are highly sensitive biometric physical data of millions of people, of everyone. So of people that adhere to the law and have no criminal intentions. Second, the plans for an obligation for fingerprints and ID cards, in our view, has nothing to do with freedoms, ensuring freedoms of citizens. It is an obligation. It's a coercion. So it's the opposite of freedom. I cannot decide whether my fingerprints are to be stored or not. And I should add, until the 2nd of August in Germany, it will be possible to make that decision. A general obligation for fingerprinting is also not an effective defense against terrorism, third. And fourth, the planned obligation is not required to improve ID cards in terms of safeguarding against fakes and manipulation. Fifth, the rare cases, as far as we can tell from the numbers, in which a quicker check of an identity can be made possible with checking fingerprints, that is in no way proportionate to a blanket general obligation to store fingerprints. And sixth, the numbers that we know tell us that German ID cards are rarely faked, and I'm sure that probably this means that there are elaborate security features in German ID cards that might be different in other countries. And also a number that has been mentioned in the German Parliament in 2019, there were about 1,000 reported cases of ID card abuse through people that looked similar to the photo. What we do not know is how many of these cases was it actually impossible and remained impossible to clarify the identity, and what actually was the case that was reported. Was this about unauthorized purchase of alcohol? Was it about getting a kind of a discount card on the railway, or what was it? And the recommendation and the impact assessment by the EU Commission, as far as we know, has sadly ignored the position of the European Data Protection Commissioner and the European Agency for Fundamental Rights. And we fear that there will be long-term threats to IT security and for the privacy of citizens, because fingerprints or patterns are already used against keys, or rather passwords, for offices, residences, cars, smartphones, and the like. And that will also include online banking in the future, access to private communication. So we fear that further spread of this technology entails higher security risks. And I will close with this. There are better alternatives to this draft law, which have not been looked at as far as we know. In our statement, we name 6 alternatives, or rather rooms for maneuvering in the implementation of the regulation. The first would be optimizing the existing procedures to verify a person's identity. Why does this take so long at the moment? And the numbers, how often is it actually necessary? The European Data Protection Commission argues that patterns should be used rather than complete fingerprints. Then the option to not take fingerprints of the index finger, but other fingers. And Thilo Weichert, another expert, will talk about a stricter limitation of purpose. What would also be possible is a reform of the obligation in Germany to have an ID card. They could be abolished or replaced by residence cards that every person, independent of their nationality, could receive. Less discrimination. And 6th, a last option, a more targeted security legislation focusing concrete threats and not focusing all of society. So that is my statement, and thank you for your attention.
Hello Internet, I'm Fabian, and the lightning talk is called Hack Yourself an Open Source Laptop. Just open software is 3 components. So UEFI BIOS, that's the firmware. Then the embedded controller, that's the firmware mostly for the fans and some controllers, and of course the OS and the kernel. So that would be a BSD or a Linux. That's accessible, but the firmware is more difficult. So there is, for example, core boot, but it's rare to have compatible software, and for laptops there's mostly very old ThinkPads. But there are manufacturers who offer laptops with core boot, for example, Purism or this one from System 76, and it has an American keyboard. The details you can see on the screen. So it's a open firmware that was also provided on GitHub, and there is a few markets where you can buy that with a European keyboard. And I also wrote a blog post how you can exchange the keyboard yourself. So first of all, you have to unscrew the bottom plate and open it. So the computer really has no power. You have to unplug the battery, and right next to the RAM there is this little chip and that chip includes the firmware. Right now it's the proprietary from Clevo, and after we flashed it, it will be system 76. Point is pin number 1. Putting the firmware on, we will use this little tool. On the one side, we have a USB that will go into a second PC you need for flashing. Then there is the cable, and the red one marks pin 1. So you have to find the BIOS chip again, and you will use this crocodile clip, and with the pin 1 is marked, and you have to put it on the chip like so. Then there's the flashing process. You've seen it on screen. Then it's flashing, as you can see. A rather quick process. And right below the BIOS chip, there's the embedded controller. We also flash this with an Arduino Mega. To plug that in, we have to unscrew or unplug the keyboard. We do that by opening this plug or this port and take it out. So instead of the keyboard, we put in an Arduino Mega. It has an FPC cable with a few pins with very, very small details. It's a rather short cable. This flap has to go in there and close it. Now we have to plug in 2 USB cables, the blue from the Arduino and the black that comes from the Clevo notebook, and combine and connect both of them to the computer we are flashing from. Now I reconnected the battery and the keyboard and closed up, turned it over, and am now starting it. And I am see the System 76 firmware. I can enter the menu. There is also the Intel Management Engine, and this is disabled to increase security. Yeah. So this is what you have to do if you could not buy it with the firmware already included. Thank you very much.
Right. We interpreters are standing by, not knowing whether there'll be any more communication, but as you remember, you were all invited to meet the speakers in the break room. Yes, welcome back. I hope you had lots of fun and interesting new information in these videos. Thank you. And you will now find our speakers in the workshop room. That's the other stream. And go to the schedule, which is fahrplan.privacyweek.at. Fahrplan is German for schedule. There's also a Q&A button that you can use. I didn't hear which page it's in. We have a little technical problem. If you enter this room, you will immediately be in the first breakout room. If that is not the one you want to go to, there are 2 tabs that are open, and one of these is the breakout room and the other is the main room. And in the main room, you will find which breakout room has been assigned to which speaker. So in cases of doubt, you close the tab with the wrong breakout room, and you will find yourself back in the main room from where you can connect to the right breakout room. So all that, the link to all that is right next to the slot lightning talk in the schedule. And then